Hello and welcome back to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum, Vision, Strategy, Trends. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Vatsala Sarathy, Managing Director, Stanford University Graduate School of Business. Vatsala Sarathy is a leader with many talents. She manages technology, finance, and operations at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. She is also an ICF credential coach. And in her spare time, she's trying her hands at an Indian drum instrument called the tabla. We're excited to have Vatsala and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Vision 2022, Digital Dexterity Challenges, Trends, and Priorities. Vatsala, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Thank you, Michael, for the wonderful introduction and for kicking off this session. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on data dexterity today. I am so very excited to be here with you all. Digital dexterity is a topic that's top of mind for everyone in the workforce today, irrespective of role, industry, and size of the organization. We will talk about what digital dexterity means to each of us, and also look at our individual roles and collective roles as part of an organization to compete in the marketplace. We are very fortunate to have a diverse set of panelists today, from whom I hope we will see a fascinating exchange of ideas. I'm honored to introduce to you our panelists, starting with Robin Austin. Robin Austin is the CTO and CISO for Colliers Group. She focuses on digital transformation to improve customer and employee interaction and retention. Robin has spearheaded and principled 2 private companies, and her first was at the age of 28. Obviously, she must have enjoyed that first experience since she went on to repeat it for a second time. We can't wait to hear your thoughts on building and growing a digitally savvy organization, Robin. We also have Vishal Gupta, who is the Senior Vice President and CIO CTO for Lexmark International. He runs the Unified Connected Technology and Ventures team at Lexmark, focusing on global IT, software, data science, and corporate strategy. Vishal loves to travel. He's been to over 80 countries. I'm sure you have some amazing stories to tell of your adventures, and I think your travels give you a unique insight into the cultures and subcultures within your global team. Finally, we have Mir Ali, who is the head of software engineering at Kraft Heinz Company. He manages a variety of functions ranging from architecture to data, product, and platform. Mir is an avid reader, and the current book he's reading is called Illogical by Emmanuel Ocho, who is a former NFL linebacker, where the author makes a case for throwing conventional wisdom, also known as logic, out the window. Isn't that fascinating? Welcome, panelists. And as we talk to all of you, we will touch upon a number of areas related to building a digitally dexterous organization. We will touch upon topics such as strategy, roadmap, change management, tools, analytics. Feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat box, and we will address some of them towards the end of the session. So with that, let's dive in and get started. My first question is around the idea of readiness. Vishal, how do you gauge your organization's digital dexterity readiness?
Thank you, Vatsala, for the question. So, if I think about digital dexterity, it's essentially having the courage and the ability to transform through digital means. And if you think about the readiness, I think there's sort of 3 elements to that readiness, right? There is the change readiness. How ready is the organization for change? And you can measure that through things like engagement scores. I think they were already very strong. When I joined for Lexmark, we have engagement scores that run in 90s. Then you think about the second aspect in terms of talent readiness, because if you're ready for change through high engagement scores, how ready is the organization ready from a digital talent perspective in things like AI or cloud or others? And that's an area that, we've significantly invested in the last couple of years, going from things like 5 data scientists to 50, or a number of user experience folks, or, training up people and things like cloud and all, just so we can, find interesting ways to embrace digital technologies. And then I would say the third element of digital dexterity or readiness will really come from readiness from a cultural perspective to work cross-functionally, where you need that ability to have the interlock between different teams. And that, I think you typically need a structure to enable that. So you're not just thinking about functions, but we create something called the Digital Transformation Steering Team, which had representation from all the functions to really enable us to more work in a unified manner as opposed to in our specific function. So that's how I measure the readiness, Vatsala, in looking at our readiness from change perspective, our readiness from talent perspective, and our readiness from that interlock or cross-functional perspective.
That sounds great. Thank you. Robin, how do you prepare your organization to become excited about the digital transformation plan? Can you please unmute?
I thought I was. I apologize. So we've designed methodology around the gaming structure. So how we prepare is subtly. You can't say go prepare. Well, so we have a trivia game that, in fact, is not only gives us analytics and measurement about how ready they are, but also to bring them along and have them understand how ready they are, but also within the organization, it's a fun engagement so that they not only are becoming ready, but they're also collaborating and engaging with each other. The second thing we do is we have a collaboration hub, obviously. Most companies do. And we constantly add different collaboration tools out there. And some of those, back to the gaming structure, but some of those are just chat features for engagement across the cultural, we call the cultural within our company, the culture. So it's not just about engagement from a project perspective, where they're all working on the same project, but we also have them, we steer them from from our leadership mechanism to engage in collaboration across culture. That also, with all that analytics and also those mechanisms, it gives us an idea about who we can possibly put in different positions that may not be in technology positions today, or IT positions today, or security positions today. So it gives us, so instead of having, how do I say, a constant, emptiness of hiring people, we're beginning to look more and more across our own internal structure based on job description to see if there could be a possible fit with a little bit of training. And that's also what we do within the hub.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It also ties to what Vishal said about interlocking the different teams and working collaboratively. So Mir, I have a question that I have been thinking about quite a bit in recent times. When you think about creating or co-creating with the entire organization a digitally dexterous solution, do you start with the task force to manage this process, and if so, what might that task force look like? Or do you think it should be the IT organization that manages and produces this roadmap or methodology for digital transformation?
So actually, it's a very good question, right? So like you said, digital by its nature, it's a collaborative transformation. It's a business transformation.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of many teams coming together to make that happen for the organization, right? So in our case, right, so digital organization, so what we look at when we look at rolling out digital products, right, across the organization, the way we're looking at it is IT plays a big part. However, what we see is there is a separate team owning that responsibility from a change management perspective, right? So another term, right? Change management is something we've been doing. So they are the one who are working close to that business group. So we have change managers that are aligned to a business and based on that business, because they do understand what they do today and how that's going to change, right? So they're basically a middleman in terms of really translating the current state to the future state and being able to really help that. So articulate. So there's a change management team that is working on the entire, right from the get-go. They are not brought in last minute. All right, we're ready to go. Come in, you do your job. No, they are engaged right from the get-go, from that particular business area, working along the sites, building sort of a story to tell how that's going to transform and actually managing that. So in that case, training, they really look at, what particular skill, right? Somebody just worked Excel all their life for a tool. Now they're moving to more, let's say, low-code, no-code platform or anything. So upskilling of the training. And then they're also looking at benchmarking, right? What a sales organization or supply chain does we do in craft versus somebody else, right? Sort of the adoption wise. And they're also looking at various, sort of the Gen Z's view, the baby boomers, right? So everybody has a different way of learning. So we're also looking at how did that play into picture. And then obviously the last piece is just creating that training and really a good training program. So it's a comprehensive, but this is how we're looking at it, and obviously I'm not saying this is great success, but this is working well so far. And obviously we have some scores, engagement scores, NPS scores that we're working and some platform as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think from what you're saying, I feel like the IT organization is the catalyst, but doesn't completely, control how it's done. And so I think that's very interesting to see that organization as in a different picture. And that leads me to the next question, Vishal. How do you think the role of the CIO / CTO, CISO, all of these C-suite technology leaders, how has the role for them changed as we think about how we are managing the digital transformation process?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, I think from my perspective, I kind of grew up more on the CTO side of the house and then I went on to the IT side as well. And I think if I look at where we were, say, 10 years back versus where we're now, I think the big change is in the past, I think technology, you sort of had the world of technology companies and then everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And now I think we're at a point, Watsala, where I would say in general, technology has become the business. And what I mean by that is, even if you're not a technology company, you're a technology-enabled company.
Yeah.
So even if you are in real estate, which one of my panelists is in, or food, which another panelist might be in, technology plays such a central role in your profitability, in your growth, in your ability to satisfy your customers and partners, in your ability to satisfy and enable your employees, that it essentially becomes no longer that there was a time when finance or sales was considered like the most critical function. And I think we're at a point of evolution where technology has become the key differentiator from both a top and a bottom line perspective in the company's ability to compete. Because I think that what has happened over time is both the pace of change has gone faster, especially with the pandemic, which requires more transformation and more competition from companies across everywhere and of every type. And that essentially requires embracing technology in new and exciting ways to drive your own transformation. And so in that backdrop, the role of the CIO and CTO has morphed from figuring more about employee experiences to now worrying a lot about customer and partner and really experiences across the entire value chain.
Yeah.
And that requires, collaboration. That requires courage, because you sort of have to almost reinvent what businesses you're in, what are you selling, how you're selling it. You have to reinvent services that you provide to your customer. You have to essentially, we talk about data being the new gold, right? And so you really have to think about how do you drive all the decisions in the company leveraging data, enabling your employees to work wherever they are, enabling people to drive new transformations, new innovations, and constantly seeing how to do things cheaper, better, faster. And so, so I think the role of the CIO has evolved to be more of a change maker, change enabler, a partner, as opposed to being more focused on technology alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched upon some really great ideas here. You talked about data democracy, right? Data in the hands of everybody. I think Mir talked about low-code tools. So everybody is a coder, everybody is a technologist, as you mentioned. And there is a great question that just came in, which I might throw in to all three of you. What's your greatest challenge? I mean, we have talked about change, we have talked about data, we have talked about technology. If technology is going to be the business for every company, what might be the greatest challenge to get that accepted across the organization?
Well, I'll step in there and take that, Vasala. Okay, so the customer, you have to look at it from the end result. So it's from out in. So not only from the customer side. So the best way to deal with having that acceptability at the leadership level or key stakeholder level is to start with the end in mind, which is a little trite phrase, but it really is focusing on communication with your customer base, determining, frankly, what their digital readiness is, okay? Yeah. Because they're the ones who are going to drive the change internally. And not only that, to keep and hire great talent, skilled talent, it's the same. So if we're looking at, we also need to embrace the fact that, not all decisions or not all, we need to embrace Gen X's, I should say, digital people who are born in the digital world into possibly even giving us feedback on how we're doing. So back to our council or our groups of internal mechanism, we can include a diverse set of those people on those councils. I'm going to call them councils because they can be councils, different kinds of councils for security. Unless you have a full, that's just, a full digitization council, which we do also, but you might have different councils throughout the organization helping to drive different aspects of the organization. So I suggest that you really have the next generation or the generation now be able to add to those those kinds of approaches that you want to take going forward. But it is back to maintaining and keeping talent and how ready that is. So I would talk to those new employees that are coming in, making sure that they're ready, as well as your customer base.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you're starting off with the customer, but also then bringing it back to a diversity of ideas internally. So question that comes to my mind is, as you plan this roadmap with your council and with a diverse set of people thinking about this problem, do you start small and build upon small successes? Or do you think big and bold and start doing this widely across your entire organization? And again, to Robin's point, do you start with customer-facing operations, or do you actually start with internal core operations? Anyone?
So
maybe go ahead, Mir.
I want to comment on the last question just a bit. So, I mean, I think that's says greatest challenge getting technology as a business. So technology can never, in my opinion, never business, right? Technology is enabler of business. So it's a big distinction in my mind. It's an enabler. That's number one. Number two, concept of digital fluency, digital literacy needs to be across, top to bottom. Everyone needs to understand what does that mean. Sometimes like buzzwords all thrown around. We need to make sure as an organization, everyone understands what does digital mean, and just simple things needs to be aligned. And
Yeah.
last but not least is like commitment from the top has to be there, right? So what is for the end goal, like she said, at the end in mind? What's the future say? What is that we want, sort of the key outcomes needs to keep in mind. So technology will be an enabler. They need to have a seat at the table so that they can really, so enabling function. Anyway, but moving on to the
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. She asked you a question. I wanted to throw something in there about that and the fact that we need to start, like I said, start with the end in mind, but we need to listen more. I mean, there are human skills that we need to also develop among our teams. And we can test that. And also back to Mir's point of view about training, we need to pick up on some of those humanistic skills and improve those internally. Sorry, Amir, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, this is good. It's a good add-in because at the end, that's what we're trying to share here.
Yeah.
To the question, Vishal, do you have things to add to that same question or?
No, I want to let you finish and then I'll add.
Okay. So in terms of the adoption, I said, how do we start Big Bang or solve? So, I mean, I always think of it as you got a use case, you got a pilot, and you scale it, right? So it's a simple 3 steps that at least I have back of my mind. And in the pilot to scaling, that's what we figure out, in terms of what is your adoption strategy and the roadmap. It's like, how do you take it? Today, it's, a business group. Tomorrow, it's going to be, region, zone, and global. How does that? Because as you think through all this, because we're a global company, and things change from US to Canada and Canada to Europe and all of that. So we have complexity, it gets complex as we look to scale. So need to have that in mind. And the key piece of it is being able to scale the solution, security of the solution, and then just that training.
Yeah. I love how you talked about, region, country, global, and so on. I think we do this a lot too, and we talk about it a lot, and we train other executives a lot within my own organization. We talk about piloting, we talk about testing, iteration, experimentation. It all starts with being curious and, being nimble enough to try different things and see what works and then build on it. Vishal, what are your thoughts?
So I maybe want to tie some of the things that both Mir and Robin are saying. So I think on the first part, the challenge typically in making either technology enabler or the business itself is, I always think about starting from, how do you start from customer insights? Because the customer, ultimately, you want to make the customer win. If the customer wins, all groups win.
Yeah.
And so instead of sort of saying it's technology or business or finance and supply chain, what I have found is creating some kind of a council, a CIO council of your top 12, top 15 customers is the most helpful thing, because that channels the whole organization on what are the key opportunities that are in front of the company, right? Then you can get alignment behind things that are kind of more data-driven from your most strategic customers or partners. And so in a number of organizations that I've been in, it's interesting. I've been in companies which have been around for 60 years, but they haven't had that. I kind of grew up with that when I was at Cisco. So I found that creating such a council with your top customers or top partners and at a C-level helps you align to say what transformation journey we want to be in. So that's, I think, the first part. The second part of the question around, do you start big, do you start small, is I think you think big, but start small. And so what I mean by that is you want to attack problems that ultimately will give the biggest bang for the buck, right?
Yeah.
So for example, we started on a problem recently on supply chain for what we call a supply chain loyalty to make sure people are using the right things, which is worth several $100 million to us. But we start small from a pilot perspective to prove it out, to say, is this something that's a feasible solution? And then how do you scale it, across many customers, across many regions, across many products, if you may. But unless you're thinking of the end in mind in terms of thinking big, you won't, digital can be applied to many things, but you want to attack the biggest meaningful problems, because many of these things don't work out. And so you want to make sure if it works out, it is meaningful and is going to create a meaningful impact and a trajectory for the company.
Yeah, beautifully said. I recently heard a podcast from another technology leader, and she was saying she grew up where her parents told her to look at the stars, but keep your feet on the ground. So I think it's like, have the big picture in mind, but, start with small defined, opportunities that you can tackle. And another thing I love from what all three of you are saying is co-creating is not something that's within an organization. You also, invite your customers to co-create with you. And I love that idea because like Vishal, you said, if the customer wins, we all do. So that is fantastic. My next question is a little bit about training. So we did talk about it, and we talked about how training should also be a part of some of the whole plan, and you start thinking about it from the get-go. How do you think about on-demand, real-time, personalized training that you can provide to your users at the right time and in the right bite-sized bits?
I'll take that because this is something that we're actively looking into. So there's the platforms that are out there, it's called digital adoption platforms. So one names here, but the idea is exactly what you said, right? So how do we provide a contextual guidance, right? It's like, I don't really want to know. It's like, I know the whole thing. I just tell me this little thing, right? Yeah. It's like little button just tells me exactly what I do. So, so what we're saying is this is not feasible through a manpower, right? It's like, how do you do that? Right? It's like, oh, today I'm going to talk about 2 bullets and or 2 buttons on the screen. It ain't happening, right? Or you have a training which is like huge, and then you have to go to a particular one, or you have so the idea what we're looking at is like, can we look at adoption platforms that can provide this these details, right? So there's a lot of platforms that are available from a digital adoption perspective, that can help you with contextual guidance, that can help you with knowledge management, learning within the tool platform itself, and a lot of things that we generally build with an application, the tool tips, the help and the guidance, and then building that training. So basically it's just within the application, within the context itself. So I think that's going to be a game changer in terms of pretty much adoption going forward. Hey, this tool is really easy to learn because I can just get, if I don't know anything, I don't have to call anybody. It's right there. Mm-hmm. So the platforms are there, and something we're excited about.
Awesome.
I can add one more piece there. I think beyond the tool, now you've got the Skillsoft, the plural size. There's so many training platforms, right, that can create it bite-sized, that can do things. What I find is that it's also about how do you create a learning culture. And that's a harder thing to do. You can roll out a tool more easily. We've had a number of tools. You've got Udemy, Coursera, obviously the Stanford stuff. Tremendous availabilities there in the digital age we live in. The harder part is making time and driving the importance of learning. Even though we all talk about it, how do you systematically drive it? One of the things that we have done that I found to be useful both in my current and my prior role is we've created something called Learning Mondays, where from 10 to 11, we have one of the teams who will present a particular way they've solved a problem. And we have, it's sort of an optional attendance, but we encourage, sometimes we have several hundred people attending. But the benefit of that is that essentially, because the pace of learning is so fast, right? There's not just a single course you can do and all, there's just so many different areas. You end up learning, the teams end up learning from each other, right? So it's sort of a little bit of an osmosis, that environment you create where Somebody may have solved a great way to build dashboard. Somebody may have done a great way to do logging. Somebody's done a great way to do cloud or scripting or automation, or I mean, there are endless topics. And we have found this is sort of a more, not a top-down, but a bottoms-up driven initiative. And we find it brings cohesion between the teams. It drives best practices. We record the sessions. It drives an AV, sort of that inquisitiveness, which is what you want in your teams.
Yeah.
That way.
Right. And
Well,
I'm going to add to that, if you don't mind, a little bit. So it's just to reiterate back to, mentorship, and you can have, it's very powerful to have people in an organization joined with a mentor, right? And that can also be around the collaboration area. I do agree that platforms and automation and having online tools is very important, because that's what we're doing, is digital. But I still want to go back to the human element and how people learn. And, you have to provide avenues of different types of learning, possible learning, to put environments to put them in order for them to really maintain that. And yes, constant learning is extremely important.
Yeah.
And so we have to instill that within our teams, but we also have to find, not only, even though we're about digital, we have to find other mechanisms from a humanistic perspective to provide the avenues to learn the best, in my opinion.
Yep. I really like that point. Culture of learning is important, and this is something that, as a software organization, right, this is something, it's a pillar for me within my organization, the experience part and the culture of learning. So great point there.
Yeah, I love both the idea of having your Learning Mondays. I'm absolutely going to steal that, Vishal. And also the mentoring idea, because I'm a coach and I understand, how much you can empower people by, having, deep listening and having them open up and talk about things. And even if it's, things like, I'm worried about this change that's happening. Is my job going to be on the line? Or what if I'm not able to learn this? Having somebody that you can talk to. So we also have something called a buddy system, mostly for newer people, but I think it can be done across the board. So it leads me to the next question. As we talk about, being curious, being willing to learn and grow all the time, how have you adopted or adapted your hiring practices to bring on board people who are naturally curious or creative, willing to fail and take risks, willing to adopt new tools? What have you done differently, or what do you think we should do differently?
Well,
Vishal?
Oh, I'm
Robin. It's great, Robin.
Go ahead, Robin. Go ahead.
Well, we need to start with, internal. I mean, I understand the hiring mechanism to look external, but we need to start internally with our own teams first. And anyway, that's all I needed to say. I'm sorry I stepped in the middle of the show. Go ahead.
I think it's a great point Robin is raising. I find that 80% of our efforts are actually spent on existing talent, because there's only so much recruiting we can do, both from a budget and bringing people up to speed. But I think you still have a very valid point. Even in external recruiting that you do, how do you take that as a key deterministic factor in deciding what makes the most sense? One of the things that I've seen, Vatsala, is that in many organizations, because you don't end up planning correctly, you end up always doing lateral hiring. Somebody leaves, there's a backfill, and you do a lateral hiring because you're looking at the most efficient way to fill that role.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you do get that the person who knows that specific things, but it may not necessarily be aligned to people who can have the ability or desire to drive that continuous learning. And so one of the things we've tried to do is to make sure that even when times are difficult, we are still engaging in a lot of what I would call as college level hiring across all regions, because we find that it's and obviously everybody can learn and everybody does learn, but we find that, in the organization, you do need a mix of really all the groups represented across all ages, across all regions. And if you end up not bringing in the talent from the colleges, then in many times you're sort of not only raising your cost structure, you're inverting the pyramid, you are not enabling lots of what I would call very disruptive perspectives that can come in, which sometimes can be difficult to manage, but actually make you learn and make you better.
Yeah.
And so I think both in lateral hiring and in college hiring, the ability to find more curious people and then give them an environment that enables them. We recently in one of our locations did hiring for IT roles that we had never done for college grad, but then we obviously found they obviously were taking more time to hit up to speed. And so we realized we had to create a structured learning course that we had never done before. So we created like a 3-month training course, because otherwise it would have taken them a month, like a year to come up to speed, which was just a little long. And so not only do you have to look for the right people to hire internally as well as in externally, but also I think if you're bringing in certain type of talent, how do you set them up for success?
Yeah, I think that's great. I also think that as you're hiring and backfilling, I think it's important to look at the entire organization and not just, so this person has left and they did task 1, 2, and 3. So we need to hire somebody who can do these. What are the bigger skill gaps and where are we moving forward? How can we change this role into something that adds more value to the organization? I love that thinking. Mir, anything else to add?
I think that starts with an intent, right? So in terms of position wise, what you want, and then 2, creating an environment to be, right? So we can all be really aspirational, but don't have the environment to support that, right? So you have to, as an organization, you got to be able to say, if somebody, you bring a curious person in, but you can kill that curiosity very quickly by demotivating them, so not giving, right? So ability to play around, right? Such as a learning Monday would be an experimentation day, weeks. We have something as part of our SAFE, a week for experimentation and design. So 100% agreed, curiosity is a skill that needs to be looked at, part of a soft skill. But from an organization perspective, making sure the intent is there, providing the environment there, and making that environment, curious people, the other reason they fail is because of fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear of failure. So as long as a leadership, we set that that we are make them fearless. That's it. So that's all more from an organization perspective. I know there's a lot of questions that came up.
Yeah, I think that, Robin.
Well, here back to the customer. Okay. So if you, for example, our customer base changes their demographic as much as we change our demographic. So if we look at the fact that, well, just from our perspective, our owners are now 30-somethings. Okay. I mean, where owners in the past, I'm not saying we don't have a mixed age group, but I'm saying the philosophy of even our external base customers are driving, can help drive that thought process as far as changing culture internally, because that's what key stakeholders look at. So if they start looking at the demographics of our makeup of our customers and see that we aren't similar, then that's where we take on changes as far as trying to make them a little bit more similar in nature from a digitization perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I also love Mir's idea about, rewarding experimentation, allowing people to be bold and not fearful of making mistakes. We recently gave an award, which is not a monetary award, but still a very prestigious award that we do internally, to a sales team that actually lost a multi-million-dollar business for us, but they actually improvised and invented new ways of talking to the client. It wasn't as polished as maybe others, and that's probably one of the reasons we didn't win the contract, but we were so thrilled that people actually went above and beyond and put together this new way of selling that we said, you deserve this. We are sad we didn't, get the contract, and it's very different when you reward somebody with bonuses for sales and versus rewarding somebody for not bringing in the sale, right? It does make a point, and it tells everybody it's okay, experiment, as long as we can learn from it. We have a bunch of questions and I want to get to them. So one question is, what do you think will be the greatest challenges as we move forward in terms of remaining digitally dexterous as an organization?
So I think, the saying goes, Vatsala, that the only person who likes change is a baby with a wet diaper. So change is hard, right? Dexterity involves change. And so I think the greatest challenge will be to find the courage. How do you build an organization to find the courage for that appetite for change? Because change involves risk, involves, people who may, that thing may not work out. And so, and I like the point Mir was making earlier, right? Like same thing for the environment, right? How do you create that environment where courage, experimentation, risk-taking is not only tolerated, but encouraged? Obviously, you can put the right guardrails, right, to say, okay, how do you do it in pilots and then scale it up and not scale it up, obviously, if it's not proven and all. But that is where I think, especially with, potential recession coming along the horizon, the organizations will have to but they'll have to avoid the tendency usually when it happens is, oh, storm is coming, let's batten the hatches and do what we know well. And how will you find the courage to actually still experiment and actually accelerate that in the light of all the uncertainty?
Well, I think you have to. I think you have to in order to maintain relevance. I think you're going to see a lot of major companies, unless they continue to digitize and continue to bring on talent that will help them towards that digitization, they're going to lose ground back to, those who succeed. There'll be a high competitive field out there, and those who do will survive, and those who don't and thrive, and those who don't will fail, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A bunch of other questions. I am going to actually merge two questions and ask it as one question. What are some ideas for getting buy-in for the budgets needed to successfully navigate digital dexterity in the enterprise? And related to that, how do you convince your leadership that technology is worthy or even necessary?
Oh man. So let me take a, I like to start with that. So in terms of budget, and right, so if you make a conversation about budget, we'll get stuck to the details and technicality. If you make the discussion about the outcomes, if you make the discussion about the value, then and I personally believe you have a good option, right? Sometimes, you says, hey, what do you think about increasing customer base from, 35 million first party customers to 70 million? That opens somebody's eyes. But right, that's where we are. So make a conversation about outcomes, make a conversation about value, and then the rest of the budget discussion is about it, right? At the end of the day, you got to put in oil in a pipe to get on the other side. So you got to feed the system. So change the conversation. Don't make it about budget, make it about outcomes. And the other question that you ask about convincing technology, right? Same thing. Business technology is enabler. Make it about business and make it about why it's going to be important and how we want to get to where we want to. It also depends, right? I'm not saying we will win always. Aspiration has to be there in the board and the leadership. I can tell you there's some family-owned business that don't want to do anything. I said, I'm happy making that whatever money today, and I'm good. I don't want to change. Right. So you like you said, you were sad that your salesperson lost the contract, but in the same case, it's like sometimes it just there's no success. So anyway.
Great thoughts. We are coming to the end of our session, and I just wanted to say a big thank you to all three panelists here, Vishal, Robin, and Mir, as well as to every one of you out there listening. Some great questions. I apologize for not getting to all of them. This is a great topic that's crucial to every business, more so today than ever. So thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And I want to hand it off back to you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Vatsala, Mir, Robin, and Vishal, thank you so much for a wonderful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic session. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Everyone, thank you so much.